And now to tie you both down.
We tied ourselves up because we figured that's where the scene is going.
Silence! I'm unpredictable!
Oh, I didn't see that coming.
The Dead by Daylight community tend to be very emotional when it comes to the content that enters the game, and it is fair. New content has the chance to change the game, for the better or for worse. The Tools of Torment chapter is one that I suspect many will never forget, and it isn't for anything positive. The chapter released with no solutions for the ever-hated gen kick meta, except for a shotgun to eruption, and the updated Red Forest Realm and Suffocation Pit only brought new forms of mental torture to the killer players. This all ignoring the Skull Merchant, and the nightmare she brought to Behavior's balance team. The chapter has had a rough time trying to bring positivity to the DBD community, but two things saved this chapter from being absolutely terrible, and they were Thalita and Renato. The Lyra siblings were a nice break compared to the other survivors, as instead of focusing on making them feel like supernatural chasing podcasters, medieval cosplayers, or zombie slayers, Behavior made them feel relatable. This, along with their happy personalities, has led them to become fan favorites within the community. This sadly did not follow with either of their perks. Well, except for one, but we'll get to that one later. Now you may notice that instead of me covering these two separately, I'm going to cover both of their perks together, and that is because of how they were designed. Normally when Behavior releases a dual survivor chapter, their perks tend to focus on the character's individual traits. Stranger Things focuses on Steve's altruistic nature, while Nancy is all about selfish play. The RE chapters followed this idea too, with Ada being a spy, Rebecca being the medic, Jill wanting to kick the killer's teeth in at every moment, and Leon doing his best. Tools of Torment are different, because although their perks do things differently, they each focus on the same concepts. One is about self-survival, another about helping the team, and of course the teamwork perks. Then there's also the fact that they are siblings. You can't just talk about one without the other, it's not morally correct. As for whose perks will be on the chopping block first, I decided to go for Thalita's. Not only are her perks tamer when it comes to how they were designed, but Renato needs a different approach when it comes to balance changes, compared to the simple 2-idea rule I normally go for. I suspect this video will be long, since I am going to be talking about 6 perks, so I better get moving and start off with the most interesting of Thalita's perks, Cut Loose. Of all of the perks that these two had, I honestly thought this one was going to be the most popular. It has it all, a selfish gameplay element, some cheeky stealth potential for looping, and a high-risk, high-reward element that many popular perks share. Sadly, this perk ended up being forgotten the moment it dropped to live servers, and there was a list of reasons as to why. Before getting to the problems though, let's look at what Cut Loose does, because I'm sure many of you forgot its effect the moment you even read it. This perk activates while in chase and performing a rushed action. Doing so triggers a 6-second timer. Performing another rushed action during this time suppresses the sound played from vaulting, and refreshes the 6-second timer. Rushed actions include fast vaults on pallets, and faster medium vaults on windows. The moment this timer ends, the perk goes on a 45-second cooldown. Now many of you may notice that its suppression to vault sounds very similar to Quick and Quiet, a perk belonging to Meg Thomas. There are some similarities, but the differences between the two show why many prefer Quick and Quiet over Cut Loose. The first problem with the perk is that the value that you can fetch from Cut Loose is great in theory, but the execution makes this value very hard to achieve. It is important to mention that Cut Loose does not initially suppress vault audio the first time you vault. Instead, it triggers the 6-second timer, and only vaulting during this time activates the noise suppression effect. This is the big difference between Quick and Quiet and Cut Loose. While Quick and Quiet only triggers once and goes on cooldown, Cut Loose has the chance to trigger as many times as you want. As long as you have a window or a pallet to vault, you refresh that timer and get more Cut Loose value. But there are times when you fail to re-trigger Cut Loose. The perk is putting you on a timer to trigger its effect, and if you don't vault soon enough, you are punished with a 45-second cooldown no matter what. The killer could run perks to counteract window vault, such as with Bamboozle or Hex Crowd Control, or Entity Blocker could stop you since Cut Loose only works in a chase. Then there are pallets. The killer can break them, or they aren't dropped. And I don't know about you, but dropping a pallet to refresh Cut Loose does not sound worthy of losing utility on the map. But I'm not judging you if you do that. Then there is running to another loop, and this raises a question of if you have enough time to refresh the timer, or if Cut Loose ends. There are many ways that Cut Loose can lose out on giving any value to the user, but Quick and Quiet in comparison will always give the first vault suppressed audio, making that perk far greater at giving practical value compared to Cut Loose's theoretical value. Now this is where I'll stop comparing Quick and Quiet and Cut Loose to each other and focus more on Cut Loose's own value. Even though they each suppress rushed actions, they each play very differently. Cut Loose in particular has two playstyles that fetch the greatest value from the perk. The first is to use Cut Loose to chain multiple loops. What I mean by this is after vaulting, you can rush to another loop and get another vault to refresh the timer and noise suppression, and this leads to you stealthing around the loop, with the killer not knowing whether you left the tile or if you are still there. The second playstyle is one that I don't see very often within low to average MMR, and that is double vaulting. This clip from Zubat having a 1v1 against Oddsdarva shows off what I mean by double vaulting, where after rushing a vault, you immediately vault the window slowly to not cause a sound trigger. This ends up tricking the killer player, as they believe you are on the other side of the loop, meanwhile you are either getting away or going more into the loop. Both of these playstyles have their benefits, and Cut Loose helps support them, but they come with their own flaws. This is the second problem with Cut Loose, as although it can help enhance the strengths of these two playstyles, it does not help with the core problems both playstyles suffer from. With the chain loop playstyle, you need to get to a window or pallet vault within 6 seconds, else the perk goes on a cooldown and can't help you out anymore. When it comes to the double vaulting playstyle, it places 2 marks on the window, meaning the next time you vault, it is entity blocked. The perk only enhances these playstyles, but does not do enough to remove the negatives that each bring. This obviously has to do with the high risk, high reward the perk displays, but there's a difference between high risk, high reward, and just plain hard. The third problem that Cut Loose faces is actually one that I have been talking about constantly in this segment, and that is the punishment this perk places on the survivor. A 45-second cooldown at first does not sound that bad to deal with, especially when it comes with a powerful reward for using the perk. Take the exhaustion perks as a good example, as many of them have a 40-second timer on exhaustion as their rewards are extremely beneficial. Cut Loose, however, has a reward that is heavily dependent on the survivor player making the right decisions. You need to vault fast enough to refresh the timer, you need to reach the loops to secure Cut Loose value on other tiles, and you need to make sure you have something to trigger Cut Loose again after the initial vault. There are just too many requirements for Cut Loose, and these all are extremely hard to perform for an average to even a skilled player. This makes Cut Loose's 45-second cooldown feel very mean, especially when a player can't get a single vault from the Cut Loose timer. So to quickly summarize, Cut Loose's value is great in theory, but fails in execution. The playstyles it supports suffer from many flaws, and the perk can at times make them worse. And the cooldown is extremely punishing when it's already hard to utilize. It really is a shame that Cut Loose has so many flaws, because Cut Loose has a great idea going for it. It provides a cheeky idea for chases with hiding information from the killer, but its execution is poorly done, a problem many of the perks in Tools of Torment suffer from. Luckily, Cut Loose is mostly in need of minor tune-ups, and I have 2 ideas in mind to help get Cut Loose the popularity it deserves. The first idea is a minor tweak, increasing the timer of Cut Loose from 6 to 8 seconds. This is a very simple buff with a very simple explanation as to why it will be good. DBD is a game full of random elements, so it is unknown whether you will be able to trigger Cut Loose during the timer or if it will run out. So giving it a little extra time helps the perk out greatly. I also went for only 2 extra seconds as a buff, because I found that 10 would be too long. And I want to keep that element of high risk, high reward the perk is going for. The second buff requires a little more work from the developers, but I think it will be great to fetch a little value from Cut Loose in tougher situations. After performing a rushed action in a chase, this perk activates. The next rushed action audio is suppressed and a timer of 6 seconds starts. Performing rushed actions during this timer suppresses the audio and refreshes the timer. Once the timer ends, the perk goes on a 45-second cooldown. This is very much the same perk, but will always fetch one silent vault on the second rushed action. This mini rework to Cut Loose does not change much when it comes to the flaws that Cut Loose has, but now it will always fetch the Cut Loose player one mute vault, compared to the possible one vault they could do before. On a side note, this helps out on both of Cut Loose's playstyles and even enhances them. Here's a build that leans towards chain looping for Cut Loose, and this build helps with the double vaulting playstyle I mentioned before. Overall, Cut Loose is a great idea, one that I have fallen in love with over time. Chase perks have been very hit or miss with the developers lately, as they are either too difficult to utilize or they are just too easy, like the one we will never talk about anymore. Cut Loose sadly falls in the earlier segment of Chase perks, but I believe it is very close to being great. It just needs a minor tune-up to truly shine. Plus, if it is broken, it will annoy Spirit players. I think many of us would enjoy doing that.
How does it feel to be punished by your own hubris?
We're creating a clone army. So awesome.
Yes, awesome indeed. But do you know what is not so awesome? That instead of being exact replicas of me, my clones are also, or how shall I say it, so different, and not in the best sense of the word. Peekaboo!
How do you mean different, sir?
Different as in highly disturbing. As in this fellow who insists on violating my personal space and yelling peekaboo in my ear. Peekaboo!
This is a very weird perk to talk about. Many of the perks in DBD are designed to help provide solutions to problematic playstyles or to enhance gameplay elements players struggle with, and gen repair is a very touchy subject. Normally having a few gen repair options is a good thing, but when there are too many options, especially since there can be 4 players running them, it can lead into the game speeding too fast, which can cause the killer side to lose enjoyment. On the same logic, if there is too much slowdown on the killer side, it can lead the survivors to lose enjoyment too. It is because of this that behavior rarely make gen repair speed perks, and when they do, they rarely go over 10%. In the rare cases that they do, they require very weird interactions to make these higher repair speed boosts. Friendly competition follows in this philosophy with its effect. After you finish repairing a generator with a teammate, the perk activates. All survivors who were repairing that generator gain a 5% repair speed boost, and it lasts for 75 seconds. Additionally, the repair speed of friendly competition does not stack with other uses of friendly competition, so if 2 players run it, it will be locked to 5%. Now you may notice the first problem immediately with the perk, and that is its design. It's a gen repair perk that needs you to finish repairing a gen to gain repair speed boosting. Now this may seem weird at first, but it is normal for behavior to make repair speed perks that have weird requirements. Overzealous needs you to bless or cleanse a totem, Soul Survivor needs your team to be dead, Hyperfocus needs you to constantly land great skill checks, even Quick Gambit needs you to run the killer to give teammates repair speed boosting. So a generator speed perk that gives its value after completing a generator is not out of the ordinary. However, it is the need of a secondary teammate that hurts the perk's potential. Completing a generator alone does not trigger friendly competition, meaning that its value is lost when alone, forcing you to find teammates and complete the generators with them, which is actually an interesting gameplay style. Now, many of you may already be complaining about the repair speed boost too, and I agree. 5% is realistically saving you around 4 seconds, which is not a lot. However, I also get why behavior kept the repair speed low. Every other type of repair speed perk in the game focuses on giving the repair speed boost to yourself. Friendly competition and quick gambit are realistically the only perks that gives it to other players. Now this idea is rather novel, and I enjoy the idea of giving rewards for team play. However, it introduces a new problem, that being how easy should it be to give team-wide repair boosting. This may sound simple, but imagine all 4 survivors start the trial on the same generator. It gets done and they now each have a 5% repair speed boost. If the killer is chasing one of them and the other 3 are on different generators, they are completing each generator about 4 seconds faster. On paper, this does not sound that bad, but if the repair speed boost were higher, then it would be a different story. This issue was shown with Better Than New, a perk belonging to Rebecca Chambers. During its PTB phase, it lasted for 35 seconds, but also gave a repair speed boost of 6%. The perk got changed due to how weak it was, but behavior were well aware of how increasing the perk's numbers would end up making the perk a balanced nightmare for gen repair. It is why it no longer gives repair boosting, but instead a continuous 16% boost to everything else, while the survivor doesn't take damage. Simply increasing the repair speed boosting of friendly competition and calling it a day is not smart. Instead, it reinforces the idea for killer players to run more slowdown, which ruins the enjoyment for everyone. While we are on the topic of the other generator speed perks, the second problem is that there are better alternatives compared to friendly competition. Overzealous has become a great option after its buffs. Prove Thyself has always been a well-loved gen repair perk, and Deja Vu has become a fan favorite after a particular game of chess caused everyone trauma. Friendly competition in comparison has a lower repair speed boost, a more wacky restriction, and does not always help when you need it, as the repair boost is on a timer. Compared to the other popular repair perks, friendly competition has too many negatives, and its positives don't outweigh them. Speaking about rewards, that is the third problem. As I have said, the 5% repair boosting for each teammate on the generator is not the greatest reward, and since it needs teammates to repair with you, it has no benefits for yourself. It is also a perk that behavior need to be very careful about when buffing, as the numbers can easily lead it to being abusive to face. Additionally, the perk has a very odd pattern in how it provides value. Compared to other perks that provide consistent value or strong value at one point in the match, friendly competition has no early game value, very minimal mid-game value, and once again, no late game value. Friendly competition is a perk that truly rewards team play, and suffers for it, is beaten by its competition, and its reward is very low, but for a very good reason. Simply buffing the numbers and calling it a day, as I have said, is a no-go, as it can easily turn from a sweet concept into a sour meta. But I have 2 ideas to make its team play elements more interesting. The first buff is to enhance the infection gameplay friendly competition has. Along with its current effect, whenever a generator is completed, you see the auras of all generators your teammates are working on. The intensity of the aura shows how far along the generator is. Friendly competition triggers when the survivor finishes the generator. Even a small tap when it is at 99% is enough to apply the repair boost. By giving the perk more tools to reward this friendly infection gameplay loop, it helps to spread the 5% boost more easily, especially if you don't know where your teammates are. The second buff idea is one that may seem out of the blue, but is one that I think will be a great addition for the perk. Along with its current effect, once the last generator is powered, all survivors who were buffed by friendly competition gain a 15% increase to healing, cleansing, and exit gate opening speeds. It has been a long time since we have gotten a late game perk for survivors. Wake Up was the last perk and that was added in 2017, and I find that as the game has sped up, the options for late game perks have grown for killers, while survivors have been lacking. Friendly competition also has a weird pattern, as I said, where it gives no value early game, minimal value mid game, and once again no value late game. This change ends up keeping the perk's identity as a stat buffer, but also gives it some extra power for the end game and rewards buffing multiple teammates. This is a build that I have experimented with for friendly competition, while the other build is one that Cope has created. Friendly competition is honestly a headache. There's no simple way to change it, and expecting it will become a healthy and popular perk option is like expecting survivors to forget the chess meta. The way it is designed raises many new and old problems that developers are attempting to avoid, but leaving it the way it is will always lead it to being seen as a worse Prove Thyself. At this point, it really needs a rework, but there is so little you can do with gem repair without causing a vocal outburst from the community. I feel bad for friendly competition, as the infection gameplay style of it is cute, but like Plague, cute does not save it from the ever-present demon named Meta.
Prepare for trouble!
Make it double!
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Jesse!
James!
Team Rocket, blast off at the speed of light!
Surrender now or prepare to fight!
Meow, that's right!
Many of you may not expect this, but I am someone who deeply loves rewarding team play in games. This may come from my many years of maining supports in different games, but I have always found the idea of rewarding team play to be a smart decision. It just feels great when a plan between two players goes how you want it, and when I first saw the teamwork perks, I found the concept to be exciting. Behavior have been on a rather selfish streak, where many survivor perks reward selfish play and do very little for the team. The same thing can be said about many of the general perks for new players, as many of them reward selfish play and not enough reward team play. The teamwork perks in my opinion had the chance to introduce interesting and new ways to play as a team, but they sadly have too many problems. Now you may notice that from the opening joke for this segment, I'm going to cover both perks here. Both of the teamwork perks share similar problems, and I have some problems with the concept as a whole. To help save us all some time, I will cover 2 problems with Power of 2, 2 on collective stealth, and 2 more on the teamwork identity. Let's start with how both perks work out so we get an understanding of what behavior we're going for. Power of 2 activates after healing a survivor, meanwhile collective stealth activates after getting healed. When the perk activates, you and the other survivor are linked, and you both are given a unique effect when within 12 meters of each other. Power of 2 grants a 5% haste boost, meanwhile collective stealth hides scratch marks. This effect is removed once either of you leave the 12-meter range or are injured by the killer. The perk also goes on a 140-second cooldown once it activates, and it doesn't stack with itself. The first problem you may notice with both perks is that they are not solo queue friendly. Both perks need you to stay close to the teammate to obtain the perk's value. In most cases, the teammates you place the teamwork buff on will leave the range by accident, which will cause the perk to disable, but there are the rare cases where splitting up is necessary. This could be to prevent the killer from snowballing, such as in the case with Legion or Plague, or it could be to split pressure on generators. Then there is the lengthy cooldown. It makes sense for perks that provide massive buffs to have lengthy cooldowns, but the difficulty of gaining these benefits also need to be accounted for. The teamwork perks can be denied by the killer injuring players, by either of the teammates leaving the range, or from the teamwork perk never getting the chance to heal or get healed. When considering these events, a 140-second cooldown sounds extremely punishing. So what about in a Swift situation? Does it make sense there for these perks to be so punishing? Well, this is a little more tricky. If the team understand how to utilize these perks, then they can make them feel nightmarish to face. But in most cases, Swifts tend to split apart to apply mass pressure, and the only time they group is for body blocking or to reset. This causes the teamwork perks to feel rather weird, since unless both players are sitting on each other 24/7, the perks will struggle to constantly give value. The second problem both these perks struggle with is giving the value when it is necessary. Healing is the only action you can do to apply the teamwork perks, but both require different types of healing. Power of 2 is more easier, as it is to simply heal someone, but for collective stealth you need to get healed, and this can be confusing. More on that in a bit. Since the perk can only give value through the healing action, the killer can counter it by utilizing anti-healing perks, such as Sloppy Butcher, Leverage, Coralophobia, and many other options available. Then there are the killers themselves, such as Plague, Legion, and Nurse, who can constantly keep survivors in the injured state, but any killer could just run back to tunnel the survivor, and unless the unhooking survivor has healing perks, the teamwork perks aren't going to do anything. The perks sadly struggle because of how the teamwork concept was designed. It was clear behavior wanted to make perks that reward team play, but their means of applying these benefits are a bit flawed. It is now from here that we will split from the teamwork concept and look at each perk separately, starting with Collective Stealth, as this perk has more trouble compared to its sister perk. Collective Stealth's biggest problem is the way that it is triggered. Unlike Power of 2 that applies after healing a survivor, you need to get healed. This becomes a lot harder when 2 survivors attempt to heal you, as unless you pay attention on who started, the perk will not show who has the buff from Collective Stealth. This, along with the problems I already mentioned with how punishing the teamwork perks are in solo queue, leads to Collective Stealth being disliked compared to the other teamwork perk. The second problem is one that I have mentioned in many of my videos already, and that there is better alternatives that exist. Compared to Lucky Break, Distortion, even Off the Record which doesn't even hide scratch marks, the perk struggles to outperform any of them. The only perk that it can beat through stealth is Poised, but that isn't a competition. That perk is practically begging to be made fun of. It is now here that we get to Power of 2, my personal favorite perk, and many players have already coined as knockoff Blood Pact. Back to looking at Power of 2's flaws, they are quite minor compared to Collective Stealth. The first problem, which is the biggest issue, is that the perk needs a lot more coordination to work well. You know the saying, it takes two to tango? Well, with this perk, that saying is very accurate. Attempting to loop with two survivors sharing a loop is very challenging, even with a haste boost of 5%. If one of the two players make a mistake, the perk loses its value. This, along with the many issues I have mentioned about the teamwork perks added to it, makes Power of 2 feel like it's juggling the universe on its pinky finger. The second problem that Power of 2 faces is a bit of a minor problem, but it is worth mentioning. Behavior had been rather trigger-happy in recent days with launching haste manipulation. This has caused a lot of new builds for players to bring at least one haste manipulator. A good example of what I am going to discuss is Hope, a general perk that increases haste by 7% when all generators are powered. If the teamwork player is haste boosting the player with Hope, then in comparison they are 7% slower. This means that unless the Power of 2 player is also running Hope, or if the Hope player lags behind to help the other survivor keep up, the perk has a higher chance of breaking apart and losing its boost. The teamwork perks are a weird batch of perks that Behavior have created. The problems with their heavy restrictions and limited applications, Collective Stealth's problems to compete against other stealth options, and Power of 2's need to tango with other haste boosting makes the perks suffer. It is a shame too, since I actually enjoy both perks for what they were trying to do, as rewarding team play is something I believe should be pushed more for DBD. It is a team game after all. I believe that the perks by themselves don't need buffs, but instead a complete overhaul to how they work. The team play and effects that they have are good, but the way they need to trigger and the many restrictions prevent the perks from being even better. So instead of giving each perk two separate buff ideas, I'm going to give a single rework, while keeping the boosts that each perk gives. The rework is this. Teamwork perks activate whenever a survivor heals a teammate, are healed by a teammate, unhook a survivor, or get unhooked by a survivor. This links both survivors together, and whenever they are 12 meters nearby, they are granted a boost. The boost lingers for 5 seconds after leaving the 12-meter range. The survivor loses the link if either of them lose a health state by any means. The perk goes on 120-second cooldown after it has been triggered. Power of 2 still has the haste boosting of 5%, meanwhile Collective Stealth hides scratch marks, and hides the aura of the linked survivor who was healed or unhooked. I know I said I was only going to give a rework and no buffs, but Collective Stealth really needed a little extra to compete against other stealth perks, and the buff I went for leans towards anti-tunnel, rather than flat anti-aura reading. The rework helps to enhance the teamwork aspect of the perk, as it removes many of the restrictions the old teamwork perks had, while keeping the lengthy cooldown for the more stronger design. Compared to before, you can now split apart from each other and return to gain the boost from each perk, and the linger can come in handy in some situations. Many of you may claim the perks to be broken now, but I prefer that perks have a stronger identity of what they are going for and balancing from there. The teamwork perks with this rework are nicer for solo queue, have less petty restrictions, and allow for more perk design ideas compared to the current version. Here are two builds that I run for both of the teamwork perks, and which have been very enjoyable to experiment with. Overall, the teamwork perks were an interesting experiment from the developers, but like the other perks, they simply failed in execution. I don't think these perks will ever be fixed with a simple numbered tweak, as their concepts for solo queue make them too random in strength. This does not mean doom and gloom for them though, as with a bit of polish, I believe the teamwork perks have the chance to shine like diamonds in the community's eyes. I am not going to talk much about Background Player. It's a perk that has grown to become an icon for many flashlight enjoyers within the DBD community, and it is in a state where I think it is mostly fine. As a refresher, Background Player activates when a killer picks up a survivor, where if the player starts running, they gain a 200% haste boost for 5 seconds. Then they are given the exhaustion status effect for 40 seconds. The perk is in a strong state, it has a decent pick rate compared to the other Tools of Torment perks, and it has no real flaws to warrant more buffs. So why am I still talking about this perk? It's because I want to remind many players about the wacky history this perk went through, before it became the flashlight player's go-to choice it is today. Back on the PTB, Background Player had a completely different effect, where you gained a 150% haste boost for 6 seconds after unhooking a survivor. This is where I want to talk about Renato's perks for a bit, because unlike Thalita's, which for the most part are fine, Renato's had a weird decision to reward tunneling, a playstyle behavior I've been trying very hard to counteract. This perk was a meme on the PTB. Not only did it fetch very little reward for the user, but it also gave the killer player a choice. Do I chase after the healthy survivor, running at Mach 10 across the map, or the poor survivor who just got unhooked? I think the decision was easy for many to make. All jokes aside, behavior ended up reworking the perk to how it is today, but buffing it later to 200% haste because I guess 150% wasn't enough for some people. Regardless, the perk had a wacky history. Instead of going the direction that players expected, that being to place the haste on the unhooked survivor, behavior went in a different direction. Is it a direction that was smart? Well, players seem to enjoy it, and it's not breaking the game for the most part, so I think it's overall fine. Here's a flashlight saving build for Background Player, and here's another one for Salbo Plays, in case you feel the flashlight is not edgy enough for you. Background Player is a perk that greatly shows what I want from many perks in the game. It started out badly, but with some extra polish and love, it became a great addition that many enjoy. If it needs any more changes, that's for another day, considering we have like 50 that deserve more attention currently. Those 50 also being the perks that behavior refused to look at, because who wants to remember their mistakes? Speaking about mistakes...
One day I went into my dad's workshop filled with determination to create something. Wood, nails, rubber bands, and with a little ingenuity, I created garbage.
Blood Rush is a perk that for many sounds weak, but for those who understand what it can do, it is possibly one of the most busted perks in the game. This may sound a little weird, especially since the perk has not seen much popularity since its launch, but I will explain what I mean by it being busted in just a bit. First, we need to cover the perk's effect, because there is a lot to take in. When the survivor is healthy and one hook away from death, the perk becomes active. Pressing the active ability button instantly removes the exhaustion status effect, however will place you into the injured state and inflict the broken status effect for 20 seconds. If you're able to stay alive for those 20 seconds, Blood Rush puts you back into the healthy state, else the healing effect is disabled. The perk is only able to be used once per trial. You may have noticed the first problem almost immediately with this perk, and that is the fact that it is designed to act as a support perk for exhaustion. Support perks are a topic I've discussed constantly in my previous videos, but to give a summary, they are perks that are designed to be great at enhancing other perks, but struggle by themselves to fetch value. Blood Rush is no different, as with the right perks, it has the chance to be a great option to give you an extra chance of escape. The problem with Blood Rush, however, is that unlike other support perks, it requires a lot of setup to properly give value. First, there's the exhaustion perks that can be used with Blood Rush. It is well known that Blood Rush is a support tool for Sprint Burst and Lithe, and that is because both of these perks are the easiest to obtain Blood Rush value. Perks like Overcome and Dramaturgy can trigger due to how Blood Rush places you into the injured state, and perks like Smash Hit and Head On are very situational compared to other exhaustion perks. This means that the only exhaustion perks that can work with Blood Rush is Lithe and Sprint Burst. The second requirement is that you need to be on Death Hook. In most cases this is very easy to reach, but is a situation many do not want to be in, and the second problem makes this even worse. The perk only triggers if you are healed, and that means that if the killer were to return to the hook and tunnel you out, Blood Rush won't be able to save you. Sure, there are certain perks to help solve this issue, such as Second Wind or Adrenaline, but both of these perks require a lot of events to go your way, and in most cases they don't. This is actually the second problem Blood Rush suffers from, and that is the fact that Blood Rush has the chance to completely fail at the one thing it is supposed to do. Let's say that Blood Rush is fully active, and you are able to trigger it. Well, for the average killer, this is a great situation to happen. But what about killers like Blight, Nurse, or Spirit who are fast enough to catch up, or killers who have range to ignore the haste, like Huntress and Deathslinger. Then there are the killers who can harm the triggers for Blood Rush, like Legion and Plague who can keep you injured, or Pyramid Head who can instantly tunnel you after leaving a cage. Blood Rush may be able to give you haste, and for the average killer, it can be mean to face. But for everyone else, the perk is more of a joke than a solution to what Blood Rush has been targeting this whole time. The final problem with Blood Rush is by far the weirdest problem I will ever mention for a perk, but this issue is a big one on why so few players run it. Blood Rush is a perk that behavior can never buff or simply adjust, and this will forever harm its popularity. Going back to what I said at the beginning of this segment, Blood Rush sounds bad, but for the people who understand how it works, it is one of the most busted perks in the game. When I said busted, I didn't mean that the perk is strong. Instead, what I meant was that if you try to buff the perk, then it causes a lot of long-term damage. Let's say we buff the perk the way that it currently works, and it becomes a meta perk. Well, now every killer has to tunnel each survivor the moment they hit Death Hook just to deny Blood Rush from activating. I already said this with Background Player, but Renato's perks have a nasty habit of rewarding tunneling play, and Blood Rush is the biggest offender of this issue. If the killer were to play nice and let survivors go, they get bullied by Blood Rush. If they tunnel, they get rewarded with the perk not working. To summarize the problems, Blood Rush is a support perk that needs a lot of tools to help support exhaustion. It is able to fail to fetch value far easier than it is to get the value, and because of its design, behavior can never simply buff it, else it will punish respectable killer players. Blood Rush is a perk that can't be buffed and instead is in desperate need of a rework. The idea is there. Blood Rush is a cool idea for an anti-tunnel perk, but the way that it works just does not do enough to support this identity. So, with the power of magically enchanted bath soaps and the cries of her devoted fanbase, I request a consort with the unspeakable horror.
Greetings, mortal. It is I, the good Michaela. After the trip to the Witching Hour convention, I have been cleansed of my darkest sins and will provide only the friendliest of reworks for you. Here is your free and blessed rework for Blood Rush.
Oh. Well now, that was a surprise. One that I suspect will not last very long. With the help of the good Michaela, Blood Rush now has a new effect. While you are one hook away from instant death and injured, this perk is active. Pressing the active ability button grants a 25% haste boost for 4 seconds and refreshes the exhaustion meter, but also places you into deep wounds. This perk is disabled upon performing a conspicuous action or when the last generator is powered. This perk is only able to be used once per trial. This rework is pushing the perk into being an anti-tunnel perk, which in my opinion is the best decision for it. Blood Rush currently has a design that does nothing for more mean playstyles, but punishes players who play nicely. The rework flips this philosophy. The haste boosting also helps the survivor truly get away from the killer, so Nurse and Blight have a much tougher time catching up. As for why the conspicuous and endgame clauses were added, is to show this perk is designed for an anti-tunnel, and not to be used as a bully tool. The endgame should be the last attempt for a killer to fetch 1 kill, and the survivor shouldn't have a pocket sprint burst after repairing 2 generators and healing 3 survivors in the meantime. Plus, many anti-tunnel perks already share this design philosophy, so it makes sense to add it to this perk too. If you are interested in running Blood Rush, here is a sprint burst variant of its typical build, and the second one is a Lithe variant. Blood Rush is a perk that is filled with good intentions, but its design truly slams the good out of it and replaces it with something more malicious. It's a shame too, as the core concept of giving exhaustion players another shot of escape sounds like a cool idea for an anti-tunnel perk, but there are just too many weird design decisions that hinder its value. Maybe one day Blood Rush will have the chance to be something truly great, but for now it will remain a perk that, for better or worse, should never get buffed until its issues are solved. The survivor perks in Tools of Torment were honestly a mixed bag for me. Their concepts are truly great, and they were a refreshing take compared to the more selfish designs that past perks have, but their initial designs really failed to push for what they were going for. The entirety of Tools of Torment is a chapter I will forever remember, as it was a chapter which had a lot of good ideas, but their execution sadly failed to live up to what they could have been. Thalita and Renato were the lucky ones to break from this issue, and they will continue to be well-beloved survivors. I just wish the same thing could be said about everything else in the chapter. If Behavior were to randomly watch this video, I just want to ask them to do one thing, and that is to remember Tools of Torment. I ask this not so Behavior remembers what Skull Merchant did to the game, but instead for the perks. They were never perfect, but they were some of my most beloved perks to arrive in a chapter in a long time. Nothing meta-breaking, but still cool in their own way. I now only wish I could feel the same way for Forged in Fog.
Nothing gives more pleasure than arson. Thank the blessed stars I thought of this, else I would have been stuck as that miserable pixie for a week.